Some stories don't end with enemies pulling the trigger. Sometimes it's your own people watching you fall. When your homies' actions spark chaos in the set, that's when nightmares get written in blood. This is the kind of history where loyalty breaks apart, rumors fly louder than gunshots, and Crips who once stood for unity end up tearing everything down. These names echo through hood, gossip, and court records, not because they built something strong, but because they left destruction behind. 7 different men turned their own sets into cautionary tales, and the first name we start with is the founder himself, Raymond Washington. Raymond Lee Washington was born August 14, 1953 in Los Angeles, California, the youngest of 4 sons raised by Violet Samuel and Reginald Washington. He grew up on East 76th Street between Wadsworth and Central Avenues, a stretch of South Central where survival meant being ready to fight daily. People who knew him said Raymond had natural charisma mixed with a fearless streak that made other kids follow his lead. He admired the Black Panther Party's militancy, but unlike them, he leaned more toward the streets than political organizing. By his teens, he already carried a reputation as a young fighter who never backed down from confrontation. In the late 1960s, Raymond linked with the Avenues gang, but his aggressive nature soon pushed him toward independence. After a fight with Craig Munson's younger brother, Raymond split and formed a clique called the Baby Avenues. The Baby Avenues quickly transformed into the Avenue Crips, a name that reflected their youth. That word, Crips, later morphed into Crips, and the identity stuck permanently. With Raymond leading on the east side, the group had ambition, but lacked the reach needed to dominate. That's when his path crossed with another young powerhouse, Stanley "Tookie" Williams, who controlled influence on the west side. By 1971, Washington and Williams struck a partnership that created a unified organization called the Crips. They framed themselves as a protection unit for Black neighborhoods under constant threat from rival gangs and police harassment. Their unity was appealing to kids in the projects who wanted safety in numbers. Almost overnight, the Crips spread into areas like Imperial Courts, Nickerson Gardens, and Jordan Downs. This was the birth of a force that would change the entire gang landscape of Los Angeles. What started as neighborhood pride quickly became a feared presence across the city. Raymond's leadership helped keep early discipline in place, but as the set grew, problems multiplied. Youngsters from different neighborhoods claimed Crip identity, but their loyalty to Raymond or Tookie was not always equal. Some sets began fighting over turf, respect, and who held authority. Washington tried to settle disputes, but his growing reputation also made him a target. He wasn't just a leader anymore, he was a symbol, and symbols always attract enemies. Even within the Crips, jealousy and resentment built quietly as Raymond's influence overshadowed others who wanted their own shine. On August 9th, 1979, Raymond Washington's life came to an abrupt end. That evening, he was standing outside on the east side when a car pulled up and a shotgun blast tore into his abdomen. He was rushed to the hospital but passed away 5 days before his 26th birthday. The streets whispered that he recognized his killer, but no one ever gave names publicly. Without a clear answer, rumors became the truth people believed. Some said the Hoover Crips were responsible, pointing to old rivalries and disrespect between sets. Others claimed insiders arranged the hit because Washington's leadership was too heavy-handed. The killing of Raymond Washington became a turning point that nobody could reverse. Without his authority to keep balance, the Crips splintered into dozens of different sets that answered to no one. Violence that once united them against outsiders now turned inward as Crips began feuding with Crips across Los Angeles. What started as fists in the early years became drive-by shootings, ambushes, and bloody retaliations through the 1980s and 1990s. His death transformed the organization from a single umbrella into hundreds of warring factions, each with their own leaders, grudges, and rules. Street lore keeps his death alive because nobody can say for sure who pulled the trigger or why. Some old heads insist Raymond was betrayed by someone close who wanted his crown. Others push a darker theory that police orchestrated the hit because Washington had too much influence over young black men. A 2024 Black History blog repeated the idea that the Crips' unity died the same night Raymond did. No matter what version you believe, the simple fact is that his death left the Crips permanently divided, and that fracture fueled decades of bloodshed that followed. Raymond Washington never lived to see his creation dominate headlines, music, and global culture. His story ended on a Los Angeles street, not with celebration, but suspicion. The founder of the Crips didn't just die young. His death became the moment his set turned against itself. And from that day forward, every Crip who came after lived under the shadow of his unfinished vision. After Raymond Washington was gone, the Crips began breaking into smaller sets, each moving with their own codes and grudges. One of those sets was the 8-Tray Gangster Crips, a crew that would become locked in one of the ugliest wars in Los Angeles history. The name that stood tall inside that story was Cody DeJohn Scott, who the world came to know as Monster Cody Shakur. His life showed how fast the streets could crown you and how quickly that crown could burn down everything around it. Cody Scott was born in 1963, and his family left Louisiana in the early 1970s for South Central Los Angeles. They moved into the area near West 69th Street, where violence and poverty already shaped the lives of the young. By the mid-70s, Los Angeles had already seen the Crips spread into dozens of neighborhoods, and kids like Cody grew up watching older gang members flex power. He looked up to Stanley "Tookie" Williams, who was already known as a giant inside Crip culture and admired by young men who wanted to carry weight. On June 15, 1975, the day of his 6th grade graduation, Cody joined the 8-Tray Gangster Crips. He was only 11 or 12 years old, but the crew already saw his aggression as something useful. Not long after, he earned his nickname after a brutal stomping that nearly killed a robbery victim. Cody beat the man so badly that police officers said they had never seen such a gruesome attack. The man's face was permanently disfigured, and the legend of Monster stuck to Cody forever after that night. By the late 1970s, the 8-Tray Gangsters were allied with the Rolling 60 Crips, but tension was always close to the surface. In September 1979, a fight broke out after Darryl Oaks, a fresh 8-Tray recruit, killed Tyrone from the Rolling 60s. The 60s demanded that Oaks be handed over, but the 8-Trays refused, seeing it as weakness to give him up. What started as a fistfight turned into a war that would claim dozens of lives across South Central. The Rolling 60s and the 8-Trays went from allies to sworn enemies in a matter of days. Monster Cody was young, but fully active in the war that followed. Reports and accounts from the streets named him in multiple shootings and beatings during the early years of the feud. He carried out gun attacks on Rolling 60s members and earned a reputation as one of the most feared young Crips in Los Angeles. His face became known across neighborhoods as someone who would pull the trigger without hesitation, making him a priority target for revenge. On December 31st, 1980, Cody was ambushed by 3 adult Rolling 60s members. He had been lured by 2 young women connected to their set, and when he showed up, the shooters unloaded. He was hit 5 times but survived the attempt, which only hardened his image as someone who couldn't be taken down easily. While he was recovering from his wounds, his younger brother Kershawn, known as Lil Monster, shot 3 Rolling 60s members to keep the cycle of revenge alive. That ambush showed just how personal the feud had become, stretching from one brother to another. Throughout the mid-80s, the violence between the 8-Trays and Rolling 60s never cooled off. The streets around South Central became battlegrounds, with murders stacking up and families caught in the middle of crossfire. Monster Cody spent long stretches of this period in and out of juvenile halls and prisons, where his violent reputation followed him everywhere. Inside lockup, he was feared just like on the streets, and he continued building his name with every story that traveled back to the blocks. During the 1990s, his life took a shift inside prison. In Pelican Bay State Prison, he converted to Islam and changed his name to Sanyika Shakur. He embraced black nationalism and began speaking against the gang wars he once fueled. In 1993, his autobiography, Monstered, the autobiography of an LA gang member, was published. The book detailed his life in the Crips, the senseless violence, and his reflections on what he saw as wasted potential. It became a widely read account of gang life, studied in classrooms as well as discussed in prisons and neighborhoods. Even with the book's impact, whispers about Sanyika never stopped. Some accused him of exaggerating stories to boost his legend and sell books. Others spread rumors that he secretly cooperated with law enforcement to reduce sentences, though no evidence ever surfaced. In the culture he came from, such whispers alone were enough to stain a name permanently, because nothing was worse than being suspected of snitching. Sanyika Shakur's life carried a heavy contradiction. He had been a war maker who dragged the 8 Trays into one of the deadliest internal Crip conflicts, leaving dozens dead and the city scarred. Later, he tried to transform into a voice of reason, warning young people not to follow the path he walked. To many, the nightmare was already written in the lives lost and families torn apart long before his redemption came. By the mid-90s, the Southside Compton Crips were already one of the most recognized Crip sets in Los Angeles County. Out of that crew came Orlando Anderson, better known as Baby Lane, who carried weight on the streets of Compton long before his name reached national headlines. He wasn't a rap star or an activist, he was just another street soldier from Southside Compton. But one night in Las Vegas pushed him into history forever. On September 7th, 1996, the boxing world had its eyes on Mike Tyson fighting Bruce Seldon at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. That same night, Tupac Shakur, Suge Knight, and the death row entourage rolled through the casino lobby after the fight ended. Among them was Trayvon Lane, a known blood affiliated with Death Row, who spotted Orlando Anderson standing near the elevators. According to multiple reports, Anderson and some Southside Crips had previously robbed a Death Row associate of a flashy Death Row chain, which was considered a major sign of disrespect. When Trayvon Lane saw Anderson, he pointed him out immediately to Tupac. Tupac wasted no time walking directly toward Anderson and threw the first punch. In seconds, the Death Row entourage joined in, stomping and kicking Anderson in front of casino guests, security, and cameras. That beatdown inside the MGM Grand was humiliating, especially for someone with Anderson's street reputation. Getting jumped by celebrities and their entourage in public was something that couldn't just be walked off in gang culture. Less than 3 hours later, Tupac Shakur was riding with Suge Knight down East Flamingo Road in Las Vegas. Around 11:15 p.m., a white Cadillac pulled up alongside Tupac's BMW, and shots rang out. Tupac was hit 4 times, including once in the chest. He was rushed to University Medical Center and died 6 days later on September 13, 1996. Almost immediately, street rumors and police suspicion tied Orlando Anderson to the shooting. People connected the dots. Humiliated inside the MGM Grand, then Tupac gunned down only hours later. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department interviewed Anderson about the case. He denied involvement and was released without any charges. Despite the obvious motive, investigators failed to lock down solid evidence, and the case went cold. The only eyewitness who publicly said he could identify the shooter, Yafeu Yaki Gaddafi Fula of the Outlaws, was killed in New Jersey just 2 months later in November 1996. His death left a major hole in the case and fueled endless speculation that someone wanted to silence him before he could testify. Orlando Anderson continued living in Compton, but the shadow of Tupac's murder never left him. Whether he pulled the trigger or not, the streets branded him as the guy who killed Tupac. The public imagination didn't need court evidence because the timing and the motive lined up too perfectly. Anderson insisted in interviews that he had nothing to do with the murder and even described himself as a fan of Tupac. Still, he could never shake the weight of being tied to one of the most infamous killings in music history. On May 29, 1998, Anderson's own story ended violently back home in Compton. He and his associate Michael Doro got into a shootout with rivals from the corner Crips at a car wash near the intersection of Alondra Boulevard and Oleander Avenue. Gunfire erupted in broad daylight, and by the time the smoke cleared, Anderson was fatally wounded. Doro was also shot, and 2 of the corner Crips were killed as well. Anderson was only 23 years old at the time of his death. His killing meant there would never be a trial linking him to Tupac's murder, and his name remained locked in speculation. Law enforcement attention on the South Side Compton Crips increased heavily after both the Vegas incident and the car wash shootout. Federal task forces and local police began hitting their neighborhood harder, looking for weapons, drugs, and connections to high-profile crimes. Even though Anderson was never convicted of anything connected to Tupac, his reputation dragged his set into unwanted national infamy. Years later, Anderson's name came up again when Dwayne "Keefe" D. Davis, an older Southside Compton Crip, spoke in interviews and documentaries. He claimed he provided the gun used to shoot Tupac and that the shots were fired by either Orlando Anderson or DeAndre Smith, another member of their crew. He didn't say exactly who pulled the trigger, but just hearing Anderson's name confirmed what the streets had been whispering for decades. Orlando "Baby Lane" Anderson became a nightmare for the Southside Compton Crips, not because of proven facts, but because of the spotlight he brought. His link to Tupac's murder invited relentless police attention, media coverage, and gang retaliation. Whether guilty or innocent, his name was forever tied to one of the most legendary murders in music, and his set carried the heat of that suspicion long after his death. When Orlando Anderson's story ended in Compton, it showed how fast a name could stain an entire set. Another figure who carried that same weight, but in a very different way, was Eugene Henley, better known as Big U. He came out of the Rolling 60 neighborhood Crips, one of the most feared and recognized Crip sets in Los Angeles. In the 1980s, his presence was larger than life, a towering figure who shaped street politics and carried heavy influence across South Central. By the 2000s, Big U had reinvented himself publicly, moving into the role of a community leader. He founded a nonprofit called Developing Options, which partnered with Los Angeles City programs to mentor youth, provide after-school activities, and supposedly offer alternatives to gang life. His face showed up in documentaries, podcasts, and even local news features, painting him as an older homie trying to guide kids away from the cycle he once lived. On the surface, it looked like a redemption story, an OG giving back to the same neighborhoods that raised him. That public image began to collapse in March 2025 when federal authorities unsealed a criminal complaint charging Henley with racketeering under the RICO Act. Prosecutors described the Big U enterprise, a mafia-style organization accused of murder, extortion, human trafficking, gambling, and pandemic loan fraud. According to the indictment, Henley allegedly lured an aspiring musician identified as RW to Las Vegas in January 2021, shot him in the head, and left his body in the desert. The complaint also accused him of skimming money from donations meant for his nonprofit and running illegal businesses while posing as a community activist. When the case went public, Big U recorded a defiant Instagram video while driving to surrender. He denied every charge, called the federal case trash, and blamed unnamed snitches for fabricating evidence. His rant fueled speculation immediately, with hip-hop blogs suggesting rival executive Whack 100 had cooperated with investigators. In gang culture, even the rumor of cooperation can turn neighborhoods upside down, and the Rolling 60s began dealing with heavy distrust after the indictment. Whether guilty or innocent, the case left a scar. Federal heat came down on the Rolling 60s. City partnerships with developing options wavered, and people who once saw Big U as a mentor began questioning everything. His story became another nightmare because one man's downfall didn't just touch him, it dragged his entire set and his community programs into the fire. Big U's indictment showed how an OG's moves could pull federal agents into a whole set, but Jason Soto's story hit different because the betrayal came from inside the house. Known as Twin, Soto was a member of the Cypress gangster Crips out of Brooklyn, a crew tied to the 8-Tray lineage that originally came from Los Angeles. The Cypress gangster Crips held territory inside the Cypress Hills houses, and like many New York sets, they were known for mixing drug hustles with neighborhood beefs. In February 2015, Soto lured his own leader, Shaquem Rivera, out to Canassia in Brooklyn. Rivera had been blamed for the killing of fellow Cypress gangster member Demetrius Duke Graham just 3 days earlier. Soto claimed loyalty to Graham's memory, and rather than wait for set discipline, he carried out his own form of justice. Court records later revealed that Soto shot Rivera in the back of the head execution style, leaving no doubt about his intention. That single murder split the set apart because the line between leadership and betrayal had been crossed in front of everyone watching. The FBI was already monitoring the Cypress gangster Crips through wiretaps, and Soto made their job easier. He was caught on tape discussing robberies, selling firearms, and moving drugs. Investigators also said he sold weapons to a confidential informant, further building the federal case against him. The combination of street gossip and federal recordings painted a picture of someone who not only murdered his leader, but continued bragging about his violent loyalty. During court hearings tied to unrelated gun and drug charges in 2018, prosecutors introduced evidence connecting Soto to Rivera's execution. They showed that Soto wrote a manuscript where he described planning to kill Rivera, almost like he wanted credit for the act. The judge ruled that Rivera's murder could be considered during sentencing, even though Soto wasn't officially on trial for it at that moment. That ruling gave the court the authority to treat him as a dangerous offender who had already crossed a line most gang members would never touch. In March 2018, Soto was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison on firearm and trafficking charges. While that sentence might not sound long for someone connected to a murder, the real damage came from what it left behind. The Cypress gangster Crips were crippled by the federal scrutiny that followed. Informants, wiretaps, and indictments weakened the set heavily, making it nearly impossible to function with unity. On the streets, the whispers added another layer. Some said Soto cooperated with federal investigators to keep his sentence low, while others claimed prosecutors used his journals against him after raiding his apartment. Whether he flipped or not, the damage was the same. His actions became a nightmare for the Cypress gangster Crips, because murdering your own leader doesn't just weaken the set, it invites the kind of federal heat no crew can escape. If Soto's betrayal tore apart a Brooklyn crew, then Eric Holder's name carried devastation on a much larger stage. Holder grew up in South Los Angeles in the same streets as Ermias Asghedom, better known worldwide as Nipsey Hussle. Both were members of the Rolling 60 neighborhood Crips, though Nipsey built himself into a Grammy-winning artist, entrepreneur, and activist, while Holder never found success beyond being a struggling rapper. Their history stretched back years, which made the events of March 31st, 2019 hit even harder. That afternoon, Nipsey stood outside his Marathon clothing store on Crenshaw Boulevard, talking with people from the neighborhood. According to court testimony, Nipsey told Holder he had heard rumors about him being labeled a snitch, and he advised him to clear up his name. Witnesses described the conversation as calm, but Holder walked away visibly upset. In the streets, being called a snitch is one of the worst stains you can carry, and even the mention of it is heavy. Less than 30 minutes later, Holder returned with 2 handguns. He walked directly up to Nipsey, fired at least 10 shots, and then kicked him in the head before running off. 2 other men near Nipsey were also shot but survived. The entire scene was captured on surveillance footage, leaving no doubt about what happened. Nipsey was rushed to the hospital but was pronounced dead shortly after, sending shockwaves across Los Angeles and the wider hip-hop world. Holder was arrested after a 2-day manhunt and charged with first-degree murder. His trial began in 2022, and prosecutors laid out the timeline clearly: the conversation, the anger, the return, and the execution. A Los Angeles jury found him guilty of murder and 2 counts of attempted voluntary manslaughter for the bystanders. In February 2023, Superior Court Judge H. Clay Jackie II sentenced him to 25 years to life for murder, plus an additional 25 years for firearm enhancements and 10 more years for assault. Holder's defense attorney, Aaron Jansen, argued that mental illness, paranoia, and jealousy drove his actions, pointing to childhood abuse and his unstable behavior inside jail. Still, the verdict stood firm, and the sentence reflected the scale of devastation his actions caused. For the Rolling 60s, the murder of Nipsey Hussle wasn't just another crime, it was a crushing blow to their identity. Nipsey had transformed the set's image by building businesses, speaking against senseless violence, and bringing pride back to Crenshaw. Holder's actions destroyed that progress in one afternoon, leaving the community grieving and reinforcing negative stereotypes the set had worked to outgrow. Rumors around the killing spread fast, with some believing Holder acted out of jealousy over Nipsey's success, while others floated wild conspiracies about government involvement. None of that mattered to the families left behind or the neighborhood that lost its biggest inspiration. Eric Holder Jr. became a nightmare for the Rolling 60s, not just because he killed their most respected member, but because he erased the hope Nipsey had built for his people. His name now stands as the cautionary tale of how quickly respect, trust, and legacy can be destroyed from within. After the pain of Nipsey Hussle's murder, another case showed how destruction can come in ways nobody expected. This time, it wasn't an OG, a shooter, or a respected homie gone wrong. It was a suburban teenager from Palos Verdes, a white kid named Cameron Terrell, who found his way into the rolling 90s neighborhood Crips. Terrell came from an affluent family, his father a media executive and his mother an interior designer. He lived in Palos Verdes Estates, one of the wealthiest areas in Los Angeles County. Yet, he was drawn to the energy of South LA, hanging out with black teenagers from neighborhoods far removed from his world. He earned the nickname White Boy and appeared in small rap videos, carrying himself like he belonged inside the culture. On October 1st, 2017, Terrell drove his father's Mercedes-Benz into rival gang territory with 2 younger black juveniles. According to prosecutors, the juveniles approached 21-year-old Justin Holmes near 78th Street and Western Avenue, asked him where he was from, and then shot him dead. Investigators later testified that Terrell admitted he was the getaway driver, waiting behind the wheel as Holmes was executed. Terrell was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, alongside the 2 juveniles. His bail was set at $5 million, but his parents paid $500,000 to secure his release. While his co-defendants remained locked up facing life sentences, Terrell attended a World Series game and was spotted moving freely in public. In court, his lawyer argued he had no idea the juveniles planned to kill anyone, and after trial, the jury acquitted him of murder and attempted murder. The outcome set off a national media storm. Headlines across the country debated race, privilege, and the justice system. Rolling Out in ABC 7 highlighted how Terrell walked free while his black co-defendants faced life in prison. Social media called the verdict another example of how money and race could tilt outcomes inside courtrooms. For the rolling 90s neighborhood Crips, the attention was toxic, dragging cameras and police heat directly into their business. Rumors swirled quickly, with some whispering that Terrell was a police plant or informant, while others said he was just a thrill seeker chasing clout. No evidence ever backed those claims, but the perception was enough. His presence inside the set left resentment, suspicion, and unnecessary spotlight. Cameron Terrell's story became a nightmare, not because of bodies he dropped, but because of the spotlight he dragged onto the rolling 90s. His case reminded the streets that sometimes the biggest damage comes from outsiders who never truly belonged.